All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. Today, have the pleasure to have the guest Jay Turner, who looks like you're a partner at Providence Investment Partners. So, Jay, welcome to the show. And if you could, tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing over at Providence.
Sure, Jeff. Providence is a SBIC, Small Business Investment Corp. And it's a fund around $200 million to invest in private companies, typically lower middle market, which we define as 2 to 10 million of EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation. We focus on companies in the Southwest, and we also kind of pride ourselves in being creative and flexible and patient capital. So that gives us an opportunity to focus on and differentiate ourselves in the marketplace. So I always like to, when I meet somebody, I always like to know a little bit about their history, their ancestors, and where they come from. I often ask the question, tell me about your great grandparents. And I usually get a very blank stare because most of us don't know anything about our great grandparents. And actually, as you think about your legacy, you should keep that in mind because 2 or 3 generations from now, people aren't going to know who you were. So you have to think long and hard about what your purpose in life is and what you want to leave behind. But I have very unique parents in that one was from a fairly affluent New York family. Her grandfather was G. Clifford Noble, who started a little bookstore in New York with a guy named Barnes. But I quickly add that they sold it early enough to ensure that the ancestors would have to work for a living. So I am doing that. My grandfather, Noble, was a publisher in New York, but also uniquely was one of the first Marine pilots in this country. And he fought in World War One. Fortunately, he got over there a little late because pilots in World War One didn't last very long. And then my father's side of the family was, I probably don't want to know the history of them. They're Irish and came over Bucks County and basically met several generations of Texans. My mother, who was a Vassar grad, met my dad at the University of Texas her junior year. And my dad graduated from college in 1953 with his architectural license, a commission in the Navy, and a marriage license. So I was born about 12 months later. So that's a little bit of my history. Grew up in Corpus Christi, Texas, sparkling city by the sea, and went to the University of Texas in Austin, which is where my mom and dad went, and then came to Dallas right out of college. And it was boom time in Dallas. Dallas was attracting people from all over the country. I like to think of Dallas as a meritocracy. It wasn't very provincial. It was really who can help you make money and who can do what they say they're going to do. So it attracted a lot of ambitious people. And so it was a lot of fun to be growing up professionally in that environment. That's a little bit of background. I started in banking, what was then called First National Bank of Dallas. We were number one in the country in return on assets and return on equity until the whole banking industry blew up in Texas. Texas had what I would call a depression, not a recession, a depression in the 80s. 9 of the top 10 banks in Texas failed or were bought out in turnaround situations. It was a unique time. You learned a lot about what can go wrong. It's something that most people in today's environment don't know anything about. They think the market always goes up and real estate prices always go up, but not so. In fact, I think mortgages were 18% in the 80s. So it was a really unique and difficult time. It was good to be young and not responsible for all the damage that was done. But it was pretty eye-opening, as many of my dad's friends went bankrupt. If you were in real estate or in oil and gas or in banking, probably were bankrupt or losing a job. In many cases, that was a really unique time, but spent 9 years in banking, 11 years in investment banking, did a stint in New York, which was a great experience, worked with a lot of Japanese companies at the time in the early 90s were buying up the U.S. U.S. was coming out of a recession. Texas was coming out of depression, and there was a lot of value to be had, and the Japanese were very aggressive and had a very low cost of capital. So, if you know how to do discounted cash flow and your cost of capital is low, it increases the value. And they probably overpaid for a lot of assets, which caught up with them. But it was a lot of fun in New York, lots of energy. Had my fourth child up there. Also spent 200 hours a year studying for the CFA, which is Chartered Financial Analyst, which I've got. Also was a elder in our church, so it was a busy time with four children, 6 and under, in investment banking and doing all those things on the side, but very rewarding. And then came back to Texas to do investment banking. Was the CFO of a publicly traded finance company in the late 90s in the factoring and asset-based lending. I started at that point a group while a CFO that is doing the same thing I'm doing today, and that's investing in lower middle market companies. So it kind of brings us up currently. Providence was an idea I had in around 2009. I went and got the LLC and the URL and started mapping out what a fund would look like. That was what Providence is today. And hopefully we continue to build on that.
That's great. Yeah. Happy St. Patrick's Day, by the way. This
Thank you,
is
Jeff.
2026, March 17th, snapshot in time. So,
Yes, I didn't wear any green today, but I know that the Irish are dancing in the streets today.
I really appreciate you sharing your lineage, the Barnes and Noble story. Still, going concern on the books, and also, yeah, the overlap between Texas and New York City. I think it's two amazing experiences. Some people stay one in one or the other, but I think maybe your point of view has been increased by having a foot in both.
Absolutely. When you live in New York, first of all, you got to have strong convictions about what you believe because a lot of those beliefs may be challenged in New York. And you also learn to get along with people from all different walks of life, economically, socially, emotionally, ethnically. And so it's a great melting pot. And as I said, always brought a lot of energy. I loved to walk. I had an office on Fifth Avenue, and one of my joys was just walking up and down Fifth Avenue to the train station. So I lived just north of the city, and hearing people from different languages, trying to interpret what language is that, and or looking people in the eyes. People didn't like you looking them in the eyes when you're passing in the streets, but just the cosmopolitan aspect and the energy was remarkable. I hope the city continues to be that for our country because it's really important. But it was a great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes you appreciate small towns where people do talk and stop and know your name and wave and look you in the eye. So it's, sweet and sour. You kind of taste both and you can appreciate there's a time and a place for the
It
fast
was
pace.
interesting because back then they had toll booths and there were people in the toll booths. And when you'd be going to LaGuardia or something and you go through a toll booth, you never got any kind of response from people. When I moved back to Texas, I remember going through a toll booth for the first time. It'd been a while, and somebody said, "Howdy, have a good day." And you looked at them like, what they want? What was that all about? You got so conditioned to somebody not talking to you or looking at you. But so it was good to be back home in Texas, that's for sure.
That's great. So I guess next question is forward looking. What do you think? So I talk to a lot of people because we're halfway through the decade. It's kind of interesting where it's March 2026, and I'm like, hey,
Mhm.
in the 5 years, if you have a 5 year plan or 5 year outlook, that gets you the nice clean number 2030, right? And so the last 5 years was 2020. There was a pandemic, disrupted a lot of businesses, and it's an interesting like milestone to say, okay, hey, how was the last 5 years of this decade? And then based on like hopefully surviving it, thriving in it, but like what what would you do differently or what is your strategy or what are you thinking about protecting yourself and everyone around you to get you safely to the mountaintop of 2030, right?
Uh, Well, I'm definitely a planner. My wife may call me a dreamer, but I I think one of the things we've learned, and you learn this if you have children, is you're not in control. And so there was a lot of things that we had no control over as businessmen and in our personal lives as well. And so you tend to learn to a little bit more just to live for each day as it is. Tomorrow has enough troubles of its own. But I still like to plan, and I usually use the last week of December to think through what the future holds. I don't tend to think macro in my thought process because, as I said, there's just so few things you can control. You can't really control what the government's gonna do. It's all about how you're gonna respond. And so I like to lay out a plan. Um, a year to 5 years, what the future holds. I'm going to always do that. Even the last day, my last breath of my day, I'm going to be thinking it 5 years ahead of time. It's just the way I'm wired. But I will say at this stage in life, I think a lot more about relationships as opposed to achievement. I was bred for achievement. And in fact, I would say I was bred for overachievement. Not that I accomplished that, but in Western society, we think of that as a good thing, but it also can be very detrimental to your health and your family and so forth. So I'm probably thinking a lot less on achievement and a lot more about relationships. I'm getting groups of guys from my college days together on weekends and planning those and trying to spend more time with family. But also, I love what I do business wise. And I really believe, I kind of think about it this way. I think is that someday when I'm before God and He says, well, how did you spend that last 10 years of your life that I gave you? I gave you this incredible platform, these relationships, a little bit of wisdom and respect in the marketplace. And you sat on the couch and watched Rifleman reruns, or you played golf every day. So, that's part of my motivation. But the other part of my motivation is I love what I do. And there's nothing more enjoyable that I've ever done in business than meeting men and women who built these businesses and who, um, and then the intellectual stimulus of thinking through their business model and how we can provide capital that will benefit the company and the ownership as well as our stakeholders as well. So there's that's requires a lot of creativity and unique structuring, but it's also brings a lot of joy.
That's great. I like that. It sounds like you can control who you get to work with too. So,
I'm in a stage in my life where I have learned what I'm gifted at and what I'm not gifted at. And I look at that in terms of what you're gifted at energizes you. And if you're spending more time using your gifts, you're going to be energized and you're more likely to provide value. Uh, and so as a result, at this stage in my career, I'm able to spend more time with the people that I enjoy and doing the things that I'm gifted at, which brings me joy and energy, which allows me to be as active as I am. So I think that's a real important point. And when I meet young people that come into my office and want to get in our business, I really start with that. It's really what's your purpose in life? And
mhm,
secondly, how has God gifted you? Because I believe He gives each of us that talent in the womb. And our job is to kind of determine what that talent is and how to use it for His glory and our benefit. It took me a while, but I think I'm there.
that's great. So, yeah. So, I mean, your zone of genius, right? Like you're and
You know, that's when read Ian Salem's books, I said, this is what I've been thinking about for the last 25 years about how God has wired me. If you ever saw the movie Chariots of Fire, Eric Liddell, the Scottish runner, captured it well when he was talking to his sister about his purpose in life was to go be a missionary in China, but he also, God made him fast. And when he ran, he felt his pleasure. So
mhm.
that's really how I think we all should be is pursuing a career that we feel is pleasure, that we really feel great satisfaction of a job well done because we are using those God given talents that He's given us in a way that's rewarding for all those around us.
Yeah, that's great. That's well said. And I guess I have a question. I'm looking at your website. I'm looking at your customers, your portfolio, and of course, you're sharing what you're allowed to share. My question for you, without disclosing anything private, is there a standout type of customer or a story that you're really proud about, but also that it's almost like Babe Ruth calling the shots. You're like, if I could have 2 of these, I would be so happy because I helped this person out so much, or this is exactly like, my area of genius or like right in the batter's box. And you're like, if someone listened to this that you didn't already know, wasn't a referral, word of mouth, wasn't aware of you yesterday, but now they've watched this, like what would be the dream customer profile and story where you're like, this is the puzzle I love to solve. This is the customer I love to help. And let me tell you, I'm allowed to share this referenceable. Like here's a case study that like I'm very proud of. I'm curious what you would say to that.
Yeah, I think I would point to two case studies. One is where the value, well, in both cases, the value started up front, but one was a situation, as I mentioned, I really put a lot of value in relationships, and I had met a young man in the early 90s who had a vision for a business, which basically was Amazon. He was just a little ahead of his time, and we were trying to help him raise some money for it, but we stayed in touch. He was in California and I in Texas. He called me one day in 2016. Was on the couch on a Saturday and just called me out of the blue. And he was on a boat with what he described as his best Israeli friend. My friend was an Israeli American who come over right after his service, and this was another Israeli American who'd come over in the green card to go to college. And this gentleman had started selling branded athletic footwear out of the trunk of his car at the border in Mexico and San Diego. And next thing you know, he's got 50 stores, 60 stores selling branded athletic footwear. But he had kind of run up against a wall. He had spent a lot of time in Israel with his family, and in the business didn't have his guidance, and he had gotten re-engaged and realized there was a lot of problems, and so he needed capital. And we happened to get together, and it was clear that we could help him. It took quite a few convincing of my partners who'd never done retail to jump in, but after about 8 different investment committee meetings, we were able to get approval on a structure that was creative, allowed him to have a lion's share of the ownership, but allowed us to accomplish his goals. And that company was sold to a strategic for multiple times of the value that it was when we first invested. And so that was very rewarding to see this gentleman reach his vision and be rewarded, as well as all the key employees. The other situation was a very craveable product in a retail environment, a restaurant type environment. And there were 3 owners and one wanted to sell. And the other 2 realized, since he was such a significant owner, we're probably going to have to sell our company. When I met them at a restaurant conference, I just asked them, what would you like to achieve here? They said, well, what we really like to do, we don't want to give up control. We don't want to sell. We'd like to actually buy him out. We'd like to end up with more ownership than we have now. We'd like to get off our personal guarantees that we are on with the senior lender, and we'd like capital to grow the business. So by listening to what they wanted and by structuring something that was mutually beneficial, we were able to accomplish all those objectives. And they went on to grow the stores by 50% and end up selling to the franchisor for a nice gain. And both of them are, I guess, they're living the dream. One's been hunting a lot, the other's very engaged with his church, and so it's been that was a very rewarding project throughout, and trying to add value as we grew that business. So those are a couple of stories, Jeff, that I look back on and thankful I had an opportunity to participate in some small way.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing. The regional distribution, I was looking at the website. You're in Texas. I saw Texas and Colorado. So is there like a general area where all your customers are? I guess, do you have kind of a region that you primarily 90% of your customers are in your area? Is there, do you work with California or New York or, Montana? Like just how far do you go?
Yeah, well, we'll go anywhere in the United States, but it's driven by relationship. But we focus our efforts on what I refer to as the Southwest, which starts with Louisiana, goes up through the lower Midwest, through Colorado into Southern California. So that's the market that I've spent most of my career in building relationships and The closer to home, the better, because the number one thing in this business, well, there's quite a few things, but the number one, I believe, is the people that run these businesses. And Warren Buffett used to say he looks for three things in people. He looks for intelligence, ambition, and integrity. And he would say if they don't have the third, the first two will kill you. And it's very difficult to evaluate integrity because somebody who's smart and ambitious can usually it's a little bit like a dating relationship. You don't really know somebody until you get married, and then you find out a little more about them. And it's the same way in investing. So you try to find as much out before you tie the knot. And being closer to home allows you to find references and that might be more forthright with you than if you didn't. Somebody that knows them, or it's fewer degrees of separation. So that's a big part of it because people can make a big difference in small businesses. Sometimes if it's a business model that's just broken, it may not be fixable, but many times a quality management or leader can turn it to a different direction. And we actually had that situation with one portfolio with a remarkable turnaround because of the quality of the management team changing the whole business. And so that's why we want to focus geographically. We do have an investment in Long Island. We have one in Florida, in Southern California. And the rest are kind of concentrated from Phoenix to Dallas to
That
Texas.
makes perfect sense. You got due diligence, social proof, reputations, and track records are really like consistency.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And, I think there may be something this is very general, but there may be something to the culture that you grow up in that you're going to be most comfortable in and can talk the language. And I can, talk Longhorn and Aggie football and OU football and stuff. So there's that. But I think a lot of it too may be just Texans can be a little bit braggadocious, I guess. We're the only state that was a republic, and it's rich history, and so it does permeate an entrepreneurial mentality in the state. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons why Texas has grown so aggressively in these past 10 years. It probably will continue as long as that attitude persists and it attracts people, like Elon Musk to come to a state where they have a lot more flexibility in how they do business,
yeah.
where their tax dollars go.
Well said. Well said. Well, I guess as we kind of wrap up here, is there any one more thing you'd want to share that I didn't ask? But before we end it, like what's the last kind of final thoughts you would share?
We have a purpose statement that says that we endeavor that all our stakeholders will flourish as we live out our core values in the marketplace and community. And what we mean by stakeholders, we mean not only our investors, but our employees, our team, the companies we invest in, the management team, the service providers, the deal sources, the financing folks. And so we really work hard at seeing them flourish as a result of doing business with us. And we feel like over time that really builds the credibility. If you've been in business at all, you realize that relationships are built on reciprocality, where you can help others and you often benefit from that. Maybe not, but it's the right thing to do, and it builds those long-term relationships that people call you on a Saturday and say, hey, "Come meet my best friend's business here." And so that, I think, is a long-term perspective that a lot of people don't have because they're so focused on that buck right in front of them, that dollar bill right in front of them. So that's what I would share, particularly for young people that would hear this, that they take a long-term perspective in building authentic, genuine relationships.
Yeah, well said. And you said in the beginning, I was low time preference to think long term, to be patient. Playing golf doesn't mean you're not doing anything. It means you're not meddling in the short term. Maybe things take time.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
right. That's
in
right.
the,
Great game. I know I would could get addicted to it if I went back on the course, but
yeah,
I left that behind.
well, culturally, we all complain about the president playing golf. And I think to myself, well, it's better that they go play golf than start trouble.
Yeah, and yeah, keep him out of trouble, and also probably pretty therapeutic. I suspect he's under a lot of pressure.
Get your steps in, all of them. And then the other thing I was going to say was what you said, missionaries versus mercenaries in business. And I'm picking up that you're a missionary, which is you have a clear purpose, values, and again, I see it too where when people want to work with each other, if you don't align on values, if someone wants to work for you or with you, if you don't align on values, then that's how you qualify, relationships, opportunities, common goals. And you said flourishing, and I picked up on that because that's another key indicator of we all win together. The pie is growing. The startups sell, exit for multiples, but everyone along the way got enriched in a good way. And like so, again, it's really important where you pick up on these patterns of what success in business looks like. And I think it's high integrity and values and everything you said. So it's yeah, it's great to hear it in your own words.
Well, that's well said, Jeff. I mean, you it's I describe it as your worldview.
Mm.
Which how is your worldview formed? Is it from a biblical perspective, from a worldly perspective? You do want to work with people that have a similar worldview than you do. That's for sure. That makes things go smoother.
Yeah. And people just reduce it to the word culture, but there's a lot to unpack there. And we
There's
get
a lot to unpack.
I'll tell you what the culture is.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
That's great. Well, let's end here with where can people find you? If you share your email or domain, we'll type it up in the show notes. Some folks will be able to easily click on things. But what is your preference? If someone listens to this, doesn't already know you, what's the best way to reach out? Do you have a preference on email, website, LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think email is probably the best thing, but our website is www.providenceip.com, and
Mm,
there's a lot of information on that about what we do professionally. And then, and it's got my contact information, and then my personal email is JAY, the letter K, Turner, the number one at gmail.com.
Perfect. We'll be sure to type that out, make it easy to reach. Hey, you're a natural. You're a great podcast guest. This has been a pleasure. And
Well,
uh,
thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you reaching out. Enjoyed our visit. Wish you well as you continue to grow your audience.
oh, thank you. And thank you for sharing your story and perspective and thank you for your time. So we'll wrap here and folks, we'll catch you next time. Have a great day.